For activity 5.4, we're going to learn about geometric constraints. We're going to use a Inventor drawing file to learn where the geometric constraints are in Inventor, how to apply them, and what exactly they do. This will apply to both the IDW or drawing files that we're going to work on today, and also in any type of sketches that you do in an assembly file or an IPT file as well. So the first thing you need to do is go to Canvas and go to Activity 5.4 Geometric Constraints. After you're to that page, you need to go to your File folders, and you need to create a 5.4 folder. So go to your IED folder and right-click New and Folder and create a folder called 5.4 Geometric Constraints. Once you have that folder created, you can go ahead and close that window, and then we're going to go to Canvas and left-click on the 5.4a geometric constraints.idw. And when you left-click on that, it's going to pull up here in the bottom. Click the arrow next to it and show in folder. And then we're going to right-click on that file and go to the Cut option, go to IED 5.4, and then we're going to right click and paste. And I already have mine in here, so I'm not going to save over that. But you should have 5.4a geometric constraints in that folder. And once you have it there, go ahead and double click on it and open it up in Inventor. Before we start work on this file, I want to go back to our Canvas site, and under the activity section there is a geometric constraints activity, and you can either download that or hit the magnifying glass next to it to show the preview. I already have it downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And if we look at the first page, right at the bottom there is a set of procedures. So the first one we've already done, which is open up your geometric constraints drawing file in Inventor, and there are a series of exercises in there to show you how to apply geometric constraints and when and where to use the specific types of geometric constraints. So also what you'll notice is if you scroll down on the second page, you have a before. Let me zoom out here a little bit so we can see the whole page. You have a before, which is what your drawing looks like when you import it into Inventor, and then a page that shows your after, which is what it should be or should look like after you've completed the activity. After you've applied all the constraints, and we'll talk about this at the end of the video as well, but you're going to save that file, export it as a PDF, and then submit it to Canvas. And then you'll also have this last page of the packet, which is your conclusion questions. You will be given this as a physical handout, and you'll need to fill this in and then scan and upload that document as well. So you'll have two submissions to the 5.4 activity. So we'll go ahead and jump back to the Inventor drawing file. Now, we really haven't talked about geometric constraints at all in Inventor this year, but you've actually used them throughout the year. And as an example, let me zoom out here a little bit, and I'm going to pan this over. And I'm going to go and double click on our sketch 1, which will allow us to edit this current sketch. And I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click and drag a rectangle over here. It doesn't really matter what size it is, and you don't need to do this. Just kind of pay attention as an example. And when I click and place that, you'll notice that I have these icons that are around the rectangle, and I'm going to hit right click OK, and those kind of disappear. If I right click and select show all constraints, you can also hit F8 on your keyboard. You'll notice that these icons reappear. These are actually constraints. We have a perpendicular constraint here on the corner. We have parallel constraints for the top and bottom, and then parallel for the left and right edges. And then we also have a horizontal constraint for this top edge of the rectangle. So these are automatically applied anytime you use the rectangle tool. So you've been making constraints the entire year without even realizing it. Now, if I try to click and drag on one of these corners to change the shape of this rectangle, nothing happens because it's fully constrained in this rectangle shape. However, if I right click, and you can use this later on if you make a mistake on your constraints, if you right click on a constraint and hit delete, you can delete it. Now if I grab this corner and try to drag it out, I can change the shape of that rectangle. Now if I go ahead and go up to my constraint panel up here, which is where you're going to be applying your constraints, and I click on the perpendicular constraint, which I removed from that rectangle previously, I can go ahead and click on that left edge, click on that top edge, and now it brings that corner back into parallel. Now it's changed the shape because I don't have a constraint, which would be a dimension constraint on the height. If I had dimension both sides, then that would have brought that perfectly back to the original shape. So you've also been using dimensions the whole year, which is also a constraint because it constrains a certain edge or feature to a certain size and doesn't allow it to change from that. So if you made this, you can go ahead and delete it. We're not going to need it, so I'll just click and drag and hit the delete key and get rid of that. Now I'm going to pan back over to my document here and start working on these activities. Now, I'm not going to go through all these, but I will go through a couple of them just to give you some examples. So this one in the top left corner shows a sketch, and it's wanting us to make those two lines perpendicular. And right now, they are obviously not. This is greater than 90 degrees on this side and obviously less on this side. So we're going to go up to our constraint panel. And if you hover over any of these icons, and this applies for any command in Inventor, if you hover over it, it'll give you a brief description and then a graphic representation of what that does. And then if it still doesn't make sense from there, you can hit the F1 key for the help menu, which can actually be pretty useful from time to time. So we're going to select the perpendicular constraint, which is this one right here. And I'm going to select the first line or the bottom line here, and then this second line here. And what you'll notice is a perpendicular icon appears, and if we zoom in a little bit, you'll notice that the line moved in order to make this perpendicular. So if I undo that, you can see that line moves back. Now you'll notice that this line actually moved instead of this one, and that is because when I selected the perpendicular constraint, I clicked that line first. So when you're constraining items, the item that you want to move, you should click first. So in this case, I want this bottom line here to stay, and I want this other line to move in order to make these perpendicular. So I'm going to select that line first, and then this second line, and now I added my perpendicular constraint, and this line moved instead of that bottom one, so I don't overlap any of my text. The next one I'm going to go over is the tangent circles make the circle tangent to both lines on this end. I'll zoom in a little bit. And in this case, I want my circle to move in order to be tangent to both these lines. And I'm going to have to place two constraints. So instead of my perpendicular constraint, if I hover down here to the bottom left corner, I have my tangent constraint. I'm going to select that. And since I want the circle to move to the line, I'm going to select the circle first. So I'm going to click the circle, and then I want to make it tangent to this line. Notice it actually changes the dimension of the circle because the circle did not have a dimension originally. If I had dimensioned that circle to be a diameter of, let's say, 1 inch, the whole circle would have stayed 1 inch and moved over to this line. And then the second one I want to do is another tangent constraint between the circle and this line. And once again, I want to click the circle first and then click the line. And that makes the circle tangent to both of these lines. And it's okay if this hangs off over the border on top. That's not a problem at all. And as a matter of fact, if we go back and look at our answer sheet, it shows not quite hanging off as much, but kind of the same deal here on the answer sheet. And that's one thing to note. These don't have to look exactly the same. So if these, for example, on this last problem, if these circles were shifted down a little bit, that would be fine. It doesn't really matter as long as the constraints are applied and I can see the constraints. So let's jump back over into Inventor. I'm going to zoom out a bit, pan over. And the next one I'm going to look at is this fix point C and then make endpoints A and B coincident to point C. So if I zoom in a little bit, the first thing I need to do is fix point C. And you'll notice that the letters actually have points next to them. The point is not referring to that one, but this actual point, the center point of the circle, that is actually point C. And then this is line B and this is line A. So the first thing I need to do is fix point C. So if I go up to my constraints and kind of hover around over these, like I said, it'll tell you what that particular constraint is. But in this case, the fix constraint is the one that appears like a lock in the top right-hand corner. So I'm going to click on that fix constraint, and then I'm going to select that center point of that circle, and you'll notice that it shows a lock icon, which tells me that that is locked in place. So then I need to make the endpoints of lines B and line A coincident to that center point of that circle. So I'm going to hover around until I find my coincident constraint, which is the top left corner. I'm going to do line B first, so I'll click on the endpoint of line B, not the line itself, but the endpoint. And then I will, after I select that, and I selected that first because that's the one I want to move, and then I will select the center point of the circle. I will also add another coincident constraint, and it stays selected until I escape out of it. So I'll hit the endpoint of line A and then select the center point of the circle, and that line will move over, and it adds these constrained to the center point of the circle and then down at an angle to either side. So if we zoom out here, we're going to go down and take a look over here at the make lines horizontal. So if we zoom in here and kind of center that on the screen, we have a couple options here. So if you go up to the constraint panel, once again, I'm not covering all these, so some of these that we haven't talked about you will use, so you're just going to have to use your best judgment, hover over these, and use some of the key terms. If you notice, we zoom out again here, if you notice a lot of the key terms like parallel and tangent and horizontal and collinear are the exact same terminology that are used for the constraints themselves, so use that as an indicator. So I'll go ahead and zoom in here to the make lines horizontal. If I go up to the constraints, I have the horizontal constraint here, and this right next to it is the vertical constraint. So I just want to select horizontal, select that line, it'll make it horizontal, and then select the second line, it'll make it horizontal. And it's as simple as that. And you'll notice that the icons also show up here. If you can't see these icons, what you can do is right click, and I already clicked show all constraints, so if I click hide, it'll hide all of them, and if I right click, I can show all constraints again. That can also be toggled with the F8 key as well. And the last one that I'm going to want to do is the make circles the same size. So I'm going to zoom in down there to the bottom, and I want to use, in this case, same size. Another word for that would be equal. So if you go up to your constraints, the bottom right hand corner constraint is the equal constraint, and I want to make this circle, the smaller one, equal or the same size as the larger one. So once again, the one that I want to change, I want to click on first. So I'm going to click on this left hand side one and then click on the larger one, and it's going to make them exactly the same size, and it shows the equal icon right below each of them. So if I wanted to change the size of that, I could go down there and right click on the constraint and then hit the delete key, and that would get rid of the constraint. Once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, and I deleted mine, so if you did delete that just to mess around with it, make sure you go back and add that constraint again so I can use the equal constraint, and they're the same size right now, so I can just click on that one first and make sure that shows up. Then after you do that, you need to go through and apply the rest of the constraints and make this match the after picture in your activity as closely as possible, and you can always zoom in on this and take a look at it and make sure everything looks correct. After everything looks correct, you need to save your document. So I'll go back to Inventor. Just want to go and actually let's jump back to the activity. If you scroll up to the top section, you'll see that you want to save the file as 5.4a underscore first initial last name. And this actually says to export as a PDF, and I think I actually mentioned that earlier. Instead of exporting as a PDF, in order for us to be able to see all of the constraints, we're actually going to take an image of the page instead. But we still need to save the Inventor drawing as 5.4a underscore first initial last name. So I'll go back and do that, do a file save as, and this would be after I completed this entire thing. And then also you want to make sure you finish Sketch too when you're done with that. And then we're going to go to file save as, and in this folder I'm going to hit 5.4, and we're going to underscore, and then for mine it's just going to be C Townsend, and then we'll hit save. And then once you have all that, go back in and double click to edit your sketch, and then right click and make sure that or show all constraints is selected. If hide constraints is selected, then make sure you show them all. And we are going to go in and take an image of this page to submit to Canvas. In order to take that image, we're going to use the snipping tool, which you can come down here and click the start button. It looks slightly different. This is Windows 7, and Windows 10 it'll look a little bit different. Or you can hit the Windows key on the keyboard and just type snip, and that'll pop up the snipping tool program. And if you go ahead and click on that, it'll pop up your snipping tool. Now, if the screen already grays out, it means it's ready to click and drag and take a screenshot. One thing you want to make sure of, though, is that under the drop down for new, that rectangular snip is selected. And if it's gray, you're ready to drag an image. If not, if it looks like it normally does, then just click new. And we're going to take an image of this entire sheet. So you'll click and drag a rectangle around that sheet. And then when it's done, it'll pop up that image. And we're going to go to File, Save As, and navigate to our IED folder, 5.4 Geometric Constraints. And I want to make sure it actually defaults to PNG. I want to make sure that JPEG is selected. And then I want to name this image 5.4 underscore first initial last name and hit save. And once that's saved, we can go ahead and close that window and refinish this sketch and make sure that's saved, and we can close that out as well. And then we can navigate to our submit assignment under 5.4 in Canvas, and then click submit assignment and submit that image as a submission. After you complete this section of it and take that image, you need to then go to the handout you're given in class, which is the last page of your activity. Complete this by hand, scan, and upload that document to Canvas as well under submit assignment. And this will say resubmit assignment, and that's fine. I'll be able to see both documents and give you a grade on both. After you're done with that, you're completed with this assignment. And if you have any questions, make sure you check with your instructor.